Okay, just to quickly review from what we had at the end last time. So we discussed how to properly hint or how to avoid an improper hint. And we said that anytime you're hinting to the non-Jew, there are really three boxes to check off. A, that you are not mentioning the malacha itself. B, you are not eliciting any type of help or action from the non-Jew. And C, that it's resulting in a permitted benefit. If it doesn't result in a permitted benefit, then although the Amira was hinted and done properly, it didn't help you at all anyways, because you still can't benefit from what they did. As long as the benefit is permitted and the hint was done properly, so then one can benefit from that act of the non-Jew. And again, telling the non-Jew that yes, when they respond, so you want me to do such and such, that would be as if you're telling them to do such and such. And any type of charade, hand motion, or anything like that that indicates what you want, if it's the malacha or if it's a gesture for help, that would also be a problem. Okay, so far so good. Okay, now the big leniency, although I don't know how relevant it really is, but it's something good to know, is that hinting is only usher on Shabbos for Shabbos. Meaning we learned at the way beginning that there were three opinions as to what the problem of Amir La'akum was. And we said that it might be that you'll see malacha being done and you might come to do malacha. We said that there's daber daver, that you can't say the statement on Shabbos. And we said it's like he's your agent. So we noted that in cases that are from Friday going to Shabbos or from Shabbos going to Motzei Shabbos, you'll have one or two, but not three of the reasons. It's only Shabbos to Shabbos that has all three reasons. So when the Isser to hint applies, it's only Shabbos for Shabbos. But if it was Friday for Shabbos or Shabbos for Motzei Shabbos, so then a hint would be permissible, which would mean that you're still not allowed to directly ask the non-Jew, but you would be able to hint. And when we say you'd be able to hint, we mean and mention the malacha or elicit help without directly commanding him. So for example, if you needed something on Shabbos, so let's say your light was off on Shabbos. So you could not tell the non-Jew, let's use it the other way around. Let's say your light is on and you want the light to be turned off, okay? So that's what you ultimately want. So on Shabbos, you could tell the non-Jew, my light is on, because my light is on is not a request for help and it's not mentioning the malacha. If he turns it off, the benefit is permitted, it's all good. What you could not say on Shabbos would be, I would really be happy if the light was off. Or could you help me? My light is on. Both of those would be a forbidden hint because they mentioned the malacha and or illicit help. On Friday, I could not go up to a non-Jew and say, can you please come to my house at 10 when my meal is over because my timer isn't working and I don't want to burn the electricity because I'm pinching pennies overnight. So can you turn my light off at 10 o'clock? Because that would be a direct request on Friday to do malacha on Shabbos, which would still be usher. However, you could go on Friday and say, it's a shame, could you do me a favor? It's a shame if my light is left on all night. So that, can you do me a favor? That same statement on Friday night would have been usher, but on Friday, that would be mutter. To say, could you please turn my light off? That would be usher on Friday, because that's a command to ask him to do a malacha. But to say, can you do me a favor? My light will be on all night. That is a normally prohibited hint, had it been done on Friday night. And we're saying now if it's done on Friday, it would be mutter. Similarly, if you would say, it would be nice if my light was turned off. What would you say exactly? So you'd say something like, I need my light off to save energy. Okay, so you didn't ask him to turn the light off. You just said a statement of fact. It'd be nice if my light was off to save energy. Now, the word the light was off, that's the malacha. So on Friday night, I would not be allowed to say that. That would be a forbidden hint. But on Friday, I could go up to a non-Jew and say, or let's say if I had, Gaish help in the house, I could say, look, it would be nice if the light was turned off, or turning off the light after the meal would save energy. So that would be what would normally be a prohibited hint on Shabbos becomes mutter on Friday. So to be a permitted hint on Shabbos, it can't mention the malacha, it can't mention a request for help. To be a permitted hint on Friday, you can mention help and the malacha. You just can't tell the person to do the malacha. Same thing goes Shabbos to Motzei Shabbos. Let's say you needed a ride somewhere, Motzei Shabbos. Let's say you need a ride to the airport. So on Shabbos, you could not go to your Goyish friend and say, can you please take me to the airport after Shabbos? Because that would be a request on Shabbos to do malacha after Shabbos. That would be prohibited. What you could say on Shabbos would be something like, along the lines of something like, Saturday night I need a ride to the airport. Okay, something like that, where you are not saying you should give me that ride. You are hinting to them, and then they're supposed to say, okay, I'll pick you up, right? That's what you want them to say. But you mentioned the malacha. So you couldn't have said, it's not nogea on Shabbos for you to go to the airport, but as an example, you couldn't say on Shabbos, even if that wasn't the issue, like I need a ride to the airport, because the ride to the airport is the malacha. So on Shabbos, you could say that for Motzei Shabbos, because the prohibited hint is not usher unless it's Shabbos to Shabbos. Similarly, you'd be able to say, could you really help me? I need to go to the airport. So I'm eliciting your help, but I'm not telling you to take me to the airport, right? I'm saying that I have a need. I'm asking you for help with that need, and then you're supposed to figure out, oh, you want me to take you to the airport. That would be a prohibited hint on Shabbos for Shabbos, but would be mutter Shabbos to after Shabbos.
How is that kind of hachana and stuff? Like asking a guy to do something for you, Motzei Shabbos, when there's nothing other that you can do it yourself.
Right. Usually hachana is going to be when I am doing something now in order to save me for having to do it later. So I'm preparing for later now. So you're saying that my request to the person is an act of hachana. Okay, I definitely see why you would think it's an act of hachana. I am planning for after Shabbos. The issue is that the question would be, I guess, is how much of this is considered an actual action or something I'm doing now, as opposed to stating okay, I'll put it in this terminology. You really want the knowledge of how you're getting to the airport right now, because right now you're nervous about how you're going to get to the airport. So whereas hachana would be, let's say, give the case of the simple hachana case, Shabbos is ending, so I just had shalashudas, so I don't want to clean up the table, because ultimately I don't need the table to be clean for Shabbos' sake, because Shabbos is ending and I was just eating at that table. So why am I really cleaning the table? I'm cleaning the table now so that I don't have to do it later, and I could do something else later. So the hachana is, I'm not getting a benefit now, I'm doing something now to save me for something later. Anytime there's a tangible current benefit, it's not called a prohibited hachana, I'm doing something for the Shabbos need. So which is why you'd, let's say, be able to clean up your house in the middle of the day by saying that, yeah, ultimately I want to clean so I can do other things after Shabbos, but I want to clean on Shabbos itself. Well, I'll give you a different example. This actually came up when we first had kids who needed to go to sleep at a certain time, whatever that time might be. So in the summertime, many times we would get the kids in pajamas at Shalashudis so they could stay up for Havdalah and then go right to sleep. So then we asked the question, would it be hachana to put them in pajamas because they're only going to sleep after Shabbos? So we were told that that's not hachana because, although ostensibly it is hachana, it's not hachana because going to sleep is a process with a kid. It starts when they put on their pajamas and it ends when they finally go into bed. You want the process to start when you want the process to start, which is on Shabbos. So it's true the end of the process is something going to take place after Shabbos, but you already are happy that the process is beginning at that very moment on Shabbos. So then the act is not viewed as a total act of hachana, rather it is for the now and for the future. So I would assume that this would be similar to that. You want to know now how you're getting to the airport. So yes, you are discussing, again, by way of hints, so there's no Amir La'akim issue, but you are getting something right now, as opposed to setting up, let's say, a room for a Motzei Shabbos event that you have no need for Shabbos. You would have time to do it Motzei Shabbos, but you want to use the time now to free up the time for Motzei Shabbos. Here, you'd be very happy to find out Motzei Shabbos if you knew the answer was going to be yes, but you don't. So you want to know now to be able to plan. I think that would be the difference. Right, but it's tricky because then you could really take this to, there have to be a limit to this, because then you could say, well, I'm happier to know things are set up in advance, but it doesn't, there's a limit to this. I'm thinking in this case, and I'm married to the example because I don't think I made it up. I think I saw it. So I mean, I could just say that you're right and the example is a bad example, but I think I saw the example. So now it's just a matter of trying to understand why the example is not a problem, or in general, anytime you're asking the non-Jew on Shabbos for after Shabbos. So it's going to be something that it is not a true hachana, but it is something that is useful now, even though it's not going to take effect until later. All right, but without getting past the hachana issue, which you have to deal with, as far as the Amir La'akim Shabo, as long as it is a hint and not a direct command on Shabbos for Erev Shabbos, then that is not considered to be a problem. Okay. Similarly, you'd be able to tell, let's say you'd say something like this. They give the example, you go up to a non-Jew on Shabbos and you say, hey, you know what? You didn't pick me up last Motzei Shabbos or last Saturday night to drive me to, that's not the airport, to drive me to my whatever, to wherever I normally go Motzei Shabbos. So you tell the non-Jew, you didn't pick me up last Motzei Shabbos. Okay, so the non-Jew's looking at you like, yeah, so what do you want from me? So you're supposed to understand, you didn't pick me up last Motzei Shabbos, that means you're supposed to pick me up this Motzei Shabbos. That could not be done for Shabbos because the picking me up is the malacha, that's the driving the car, but you could say on Shabbos something along the lines of, why didn't you pick me up? Why didn't you pick me up last Saturday night to take me to the so-and-so? And hopefully he'll understand that you're not just randomly criticizing him, but it means you want him to do it this Saturday night. That will be allowed, even though it mentions the malacha, because you're going from Shabbos to Motzei Shabbos as opposed to Shabbos to Shabbos. All right, so it comes out that which we had at the beginning, these three reasons, and the difference between Shabbos to Shabbos versus Friday to Shabbos and Shabbos to Motzei Shabbos has a different practical ramification, that Shabbos to Shabbos, in so much as that it violates all three reasons, we're strict with any prohibited hint. Whereas Shabbos to Motzi Shabbos or Friday to Shabbos, where it only violates one or two of the three reasons, but not all three reasons, although we are strict not to ask the guy to do malacha, you could hint, even what would normally be a prohibited hint, you could hint, and certainly you can use a permitted hint that you could use even Shabbos to Shabbos. Okay, is that good? Okay. Moving on to the next thing. So the way I organize this in my head is you start out with why is this Amir La'akam a problem? Then we discuss the concept of a permitted benefit versus a prohibited benefit, because nothing gets past that. If it's not permitted to benefit, there's nothing to talk about. Then we want to discuss how you properly hint and how you can't hint. Now we go to those cases that are exceptions to the rule, where you would be allowed to tell the non-Jew directly to do a malacha. All right, so we're going to start with a list of exceptions, and these are going to be under the general title of shvus de shvus, which is how it's referred to in the poskim. A shvus is a fancy word for an isser d'Rabbanan, coming from the word shavus, from Shabbos, to rest. So it is a rabbinical restriction, a rabbinically imposed halacha. But since Amir La'akum is itself an isser d'Rabbanan, so anytime you ask a non-Jew to do a malacha d'Rabbanan, it's technically what we would call a shvus de shvus, or in English, a double d'Rabbanan. Every Amir La'akum is an isser d'Rabbanan, and when I'm asking the non-Jew to do an isser d'Rabbanan, that becomes a double d'Rabbanan. Now, generally speaking, a double d'Rabbanan is still usser. So I would not be allowed to ask a non-Jew to do an isser d'Rabbanan on my behalf, nor could I benefit from a isser d'Rabbanan, although we mentioned everyone else could benefit, right? When it's an isser d'oraisa, then everyone can't benefit. When it's an isser d'Rabbanan, only the person who he did it for can't benefit. But normally you can't benefit from a non-Jew whether he does a d'oraisa d'Rabbanan, nor can you ask a non-Jew to do a malacha whether it's a d'oraisa or d'Rabbanan. There are 4 exceptions to this rule where you are allowed to ask the non-Jew outright to do a malacha d'Rabbanan, and you can therefore obviously benefit from the action, because if you couldn't benefit, then it would be usher to ask, because those go hand in hand. So once you can ask the non-Jew, certainly you can benefit from what the non-Jew does, and since you can benefit from what the non-Jew does, we're not concerned about you asking him because you're allowed to ask him. All right, so these are 4 exceptions, but again, they are limited to a isser d'Rabbanan, which means you will not be allowed to ask a non-Jew to do an isser d'oraisa for one of these 4 things, because that would only be one d'Rabbanan, the asking the non-Jew, but you will be allowed to ask a non-Jew to do an isser d'Rabbanan, thereby making a double d'Rabbanan in any one of these 4 cases. Okay, so the first one is a hefsid meruba, which translates nicely as a great loss or a substantial loss. What this is basically saying is, whenever there is a substantial loss in place, you are allowed to ask a non-Jew to do a isser d'Rabbanan, thereby making it a double d'Rabbanan, in order to avoid this great loss. Right? The underlying logic behind this is pretty straightforward in the following sense. Chazal are making their rules to protect Shabbos, not to hurt Shabbos. So the whole idea of this Isser d'Rabbanan, whether it be davar, whether it be shliach, whether it be not to have malacha be done, it's all to enhance Shabbos. So it seems to be that if you couldn't avail yourself of the non-Jew in the case of a great loss, which was only in Isser d'Rabbanan, Chazal were concerned that you would then, because of the great loss, be overly tempted to violate it yourself. And therefore, in this case, to take away the guy would actually lead to a greater Chil Shabbos than a less Chil Shabbos. Meaning, where it's not a great loss and your Yetzer Hara isn't really pounding at you, so Chazal understood you're able to overcome. So now to create an environment where malacha is being done, or I'm asking the non-Jew, or I can view him as my shliach. So now we're making it harder on you in order to keep Shabbos strong. But where there's a great loss involved and you have a great temptation to violate it yourself, so then you have a out. A guy it's mutter. Lamaisa, non-Jews, they're not chayav and Shabbos. So the rabbis will tell you, look, we don't want you not to avail yourself of the non-Jew in order to get out of the great loss, because enforcing that might tempt you to violate, and therefore we haven't gained anything. So that would be the basic understanding why Chazal would be lenient to allow a Jew to ask a non-Jew outright to perform an Isser D'Rabbanan to avoid a great loss.
So that would be like, it's alternate side of the street parking, move my car.
Right, except that that's going to be an Isser D'Oraisa unless you have an electric car. Car works on burning gas.
Oh.
It's many car driving is particularly bad, because if I understand the way a car works, is every time you give it gas, you are creating a new set of explosions in the engine.
Oh.
It's like many sort of D'Oraisa whenever you drive. So yeah, but on an electric car, if I understand the way an electric car works and there is no combustion of fuel, then that would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. So then, yes, okay. Pending what I'm about to say. Okay.
So this is more like moving muktzah.
All right, muktzah is going to be even more lenient. This is going to be most relevant in electricity that does not involve combustion. So it's going to be, yeah, I mean, we'll give two examples in a minute. It will have a lot of potential uses. Okay, so the first thing is to define hefsed meruba. Great loss is not an objective standard. It is subjective to the person and the situation. So the most basic criteria is how well off the person is and how much stands to be lost. So if you are a millionaire and you have a $200 loss, it will not be the same thing as if you're living on a fixed income and scratching by and it's a $50 loss. I mean, that needs to be taken in. So it is a case-by-case situation. There is no set amount. Every situation is different. And technically, you would need to ask a third party, preferably someone who knows the halacha, to determine if that is a hefsed meruba. In the case of we'll get a little further and I'll make the point. The idea does not need to be a 100% loss, but if there's a reasonable possibility of a loss taking place, that already is called a potential hefsed, and whether it's meruba or not would depend. Now, there's also wealth can't be the only criteria, because we're going to use this as an example. Let's say the plug on the freezer gets unplugged. Okay, so now what's going to happen is your food is going to start to defrost. Now, because we have a lot of experience here, actually know that you really have a good 48 hours before that becomes a problem. Okay, but let's say the freezer gets opened and therefore you don't have the full 48 hours. So, lemashal, you open up the freezer on Shabbos to get out the ice cream that you plan on serving Friday night, and you notice that things are not so frozen. And then you catch your eye and you see the plug has been removed. The plug may have been removed already for days, depending on where your freezer is, or it could have been removed 5 minutes ago. But the point is, you sense that things are thawing already, and now you've opened the door, so you have a problem. Now, if this was lemashal Shabbos followed by the Pesach Seder, as an example, or any other yontif for that matter, and you had meat in that freezer that you planned on cooking up on yontif. So you could be a millionaire, and this meat might be worth $50, but it is a major hefsid because it's your yontif food, and your millions of dollars are just not going to help you get food for yontif the next day. So hefsid meruba is a substantial loss, but again, it's not measured in dollars and cents, although it could be. It's measured literally on a case-to-case basis. A wealthy person could have a hefsid meruba even for a relatively low amount in such a case where his wealth doesn't help him, so to speak. How are you going to save the situation? You need the freezer to be plugged back in. Now, plugging in a freezer is a Isser D'Rabbanan because there's a general machlokas about electricity, if it's D'Oraisa or D'Rabbanan, and we hold as it relates to Amir La'akum, it's D'Rabbanan. So therefore, anything that is purely electricity, okay, not the car, and not an incandescent light either, and not necessarily an oven, because there could be cooking involved, which is a separate malacha. But the freezer is strictly producing coldness using electricity and whatever else makes a freezer work. So you would be able to ask the non-Jew to plug the freezer in directly. You wouldn't need to hint, even a proper hint. The truth is that if you needed to hint, it wouldn't help because there would be a direct benefit, because the benefit is the coldness, which it's the act of igniting the mechanism to make the cold air, which is making your food, stay fresh. So it probably would be a direct benefit. Nevertheless, it is mutter because it's a d'Rabbanan, and we're drawing a case of hefsid meruba. Now, if your freezer was basically empty, then you wouldn't be able to do it. If your freezer was filled and you don't have, lots and lots of money, and you don't need the food right away, it might be a hefsid meruba for one person and not a hefsid meruba for another person. But for whoever it was, a hefsid meruba, you'd be allowed to ask the non-Jew to directly plug in the freezer. Another example that I saw brought down is a lot of times in the summer, if your air conditioning is not working correctly, whether it be a unit air conditioning or a central unit, what will end up happening is you'll see ice forming on the condenser. So in a outdoor unit, it would be on the outside piping that goes to the house, or whatever that you'd see literally in the middle of the summer, 100 degrees outside, there'd be ice forming on there. In a window unit, you usually see it on the coils start icing over. So apparently when that happens, something's not working, and if the air conditioner continues running, you could damage the air conditioner. So again, a window unit could be a $50 unit, it could be a $400 unit. A outdoor unit usually is going to be more expensive. If you're very, very wealthy, it might not matter. If you're not so wealthy, it might matter. So what you want is the air conditioning to be shut off. Now, the air conditioner is not blowing cold air anyways. It's because it's frozen over. But the fact that it's on, it keeps on running, it could be bad for the air conditioner. So there also, you'd be able to tell the non-Jew directly to shut the air conditioning off. Now here, the truth is that it wouldn't have been a prohibited benefit anyways, because you're not benefiting directly by turning it off. It's like saving the air conditioner indirect. So you could, here the benefit itself is not the problem, but it might be easier to tell the non-Jew directly than to hint. You'd be allowed to tell the non-Jew, can you please shut off my air conditioning because it's freezing over, and that would be that. So any example. So we had this is in the Mixmaster example that we had before. So we were discussing this shaila of would that been a hefsid meruba, because when the assumption was, and again, I'm not 100% sure if it whirred for 9 hours, it would have burned the motor. I think it's a reasonable assumption that it's not meant to be used that way, and it may have burned the motor. So if we could have, and again, it's electricity, so you're just shutting it off. If we had decided that qualified as a hefsid meruba, then we could have asked the non-Jew directly and said, can you please shut up my mixmaster? If it's not a hefsek meruba, then you can't say, please shut up my mixmaster. You have to say something like, isn't it a shame the mixmaster is going all day long? Okay, you didn't say to turn it off. You didn't say I need your help. That would be a permitted hint. So do you need to do that? So we were trying to decide, is the mixmaster a hefsek meruba? So the minute you have to rule on yourself, you're obviously, you're tainted, you're biased to yourself. So it's not the greatest thing. I was happy to be machmer anyways and do it in a hint because my concern was that the mixmaster is 20 some years old. So as much as it works and it would be annoying to go buy a new one, so it's not like it's brand new. And although it would be a couple $100, it's not like that would break the bank. Whereas if you were a newlywed with a very tight situation financially, and this was a brand new mixer, you might view it differently. You're not dealing with something that's been used for 20 years already. It's brand new. It's a bigger loss. You're not dealing with someone who has a situation where $200 might not mean you can't make the rent for that way. So that would play a difference. We just ruled l'chumra because it was practically easier to find someone and hint to them than to find someone to paskin the shaila to declare that it was allowed to ask directly, when I'm not even sure it really should have been allowed to ask directly, because I don't think it really was a hefsek meruba. But it would be far more complicated to do that, at least in this situation, in this city, than to just get the guy and hint, and which is what we ended up doing. But that would have been that possibility, and that would be the difference. If it's hefsek meruba, you can have the guy do it directly. If not, you have to hint. All right, so that's the number one example, which is when there's great loss involved, you can ask a non-Jew to do a d'Rabbanan directly. Okay, next, kavod abrius, which literally translates as the honor of people's honor. So the underlying idea here is in the Gemara that self-respect, human dignity, is an incredibly important concept and ideal, and therefore to protect human dignity, you can sometimes violate an Isser D'Rabbanan. Okay, obviously in Isser D'Oraisa, we're not going to be lenient in the same way, but in Isser D'Rabbanan, there's more room for leniency. And therefore, Chazal said that any time human dignity is at stake, you can ask a non-Jew to do an Isser D'Rabbanan. So basically, the rabbis are, in this case, weighing two ideals. There's the ideal of protecting Shabbos, and there's the ideal of human dignity. When the ideal of protecting Shabbos comes at odds with human dignity, so then we're going to relax Shabbos in a double D'Rabbanan to protect human dignity. So it's like we're trading one value for another value. But again, only to do a D'Rabbanan. So for example, two cases here. First case, you have a city without an Eruv. So in most places, and according to most shitos, what we have as public domains are not halachically public domains. They are rabbinic. They're not d'oraisa public domains. They're d'Rabbanan public domains. An Eruv can only work in theory in a rabbinic domain, not in a public domain. You cannot put an Eruv around a true public domain and declare it to be private. If it's public, it's public. The underlying principle in an Eruv is that our public domains are not really public domains, and therefore you can make an Eruv. Okay, that's very oversimplified. So in any place that an Eruv is theoretically possible, but the Eruv is down, or there's just no Eruv because they didn't build one. So you have an Isser D'Rabbanan to carry. So let's say somebody is at a simcha and they tear their clothing or they spill on it and it is mortifying to them and they are totally embarrassed. So they run into the bathroom or they run into a room and lock it wherever they are. Let's say they're at shul or whatever. So they lock themselves in and they say, I'm not coming out. I'm mortally embarrassed. If anyone sees me with this stain, if everyone sees me, with my rip in my clothing, I mean, I can imagine, can all imagine places where clothing could rip. If by accident, it'd be mortally mortifying. So you could ask a non-Jew, go to my house, get me a change of clothing. That way I don't have to go out and people see me, and carry it for me, even though the carrying is an Isser D'Rabbanan, and that would most probably be a prohibited, if not a direct prohibited benefit, certainly an indirect benefit, depending where they leave the clothing. But in any case, this will be okay because it's covered abrius. So in order to protect human dignity, we will allow you to ask a non-Jew to violate a D'Rabbanan. You could not, if it was a true Rishus HaRabim, nor could you ask a non-Jew to sew up the garment. That would be an Isser D'Oraisa. So that you would not be allowed to do. Nor could you hint to a non-Jew to sew up the garment. That would be a forbidden benefit. You could not hint to the non-Jew to wash the garment. That would be a forbidden benefit, right? These are all malachos. So you're not allowed to wash it yourself. The non-Jew can't wash it. You can't hint to him because it's a direct benefit. The malacha of washing is the clean clothes. Those are not options. But to have the non-Jew carry for you in a D'Rabbanan, that you could do. A more relevant case, although it's more like uncomfortable or socially off type situation, would be if one discovers that they have no cut toilet paper, and they discover that after they have, they're in the bathroom or something like that, or they need to use the bathroom, and they are really in a bad situation because it is totally covered abrius to be able to properly, clean yourself after using the bathroom. In fact, in Talmudic times, there was certain leniency they used to use stones and other types of material to clean themselves, even though those would normally be muksa. There was some leniency there as well to allow a D'Rabbanan in a case of covenant abrius, and it's discussed. But for our purposes, so here you need cut toilet paper. You don't have any cut toilet paper. So therefore, you could tell a non-Jew to cut that toilet paper for you because of covenant abrius. Now, obviously, if there was a different way to do it, it would be better. But let's say you're in the house, you're stuck, the situation doesn't allow for anything else. And there's a non-Jew there. Now, here is where you have to like this example, because more than it could actually happen, is that you have the contrast right in front of you. The little lines on the toilet paper, it's going to Isser D'Oraisa to cut on those lines, because that's going to be what we call a precision cut. It's going to be mechatech. The toilet paper company has decided that is the legitimate size of a piece of toilet paper. And even if you disagree with them and you think it should be twice that, but once you cut it on the dots, you are now getting a precise cut piece. That's a separate malacha, and that is d'oraisa. So you could not tell the non-Jew to cut along the perforation. To cut not on the perforation would be what we would call a destructive act of cutting, because you are ripping, but you're not getting any specific size piece. That would be an Isser D'Rabbanan. So to ask the non-Jew directly to cut the toilet paper, to tear the toilet paper, would be permitted in the case where you were stuck and you had a covenant abrius issue. Now, you don't have to ensure that the non-Jew doesn't tear on the dotted line. You just need to tell the non-Jew, please tear not on the dotted line. If they think you're nuts or they think that it's easier to cut on the dotted line, that's their business. You just can't say cut on the dotted line. Now, if you just say, please tear me toilet paper, so then it's wishy-washy because you didn't say to do the dotted line. The question then is that implied? It would be better to say, please tear not on the dotted line. And then again, at that point, they can do whatever they want. It's their business. You don't have to, be their mashgiach and make sure once you've gotten out of your command, so then once you have not told them to do an Isser D'Oraisa, so then anything they do is, that's for their ease to cut it that way, then you could use it. So that would be another example where covenant abrius would allow us to ask a non-Jew, but again, only to do an Isser D'Rabbanan. Okay, third case, Mixas Choli, moderately, partially ill. All right, so for this, let's just quickly review the dinim, the laws of a sick person on Shabbos. So if a person is mortally ill, then you can do anything, both Doraisa and Durabanan. Pekuach Nefesh, there's no Shabbos, and therefore, if a person's life is in danger, all things are mutter. Okay. The next category is what's called a chola she'ein bo sakana, someone who is ill, but they're not mortally in danger. Okay, there's a loss of a limb becomes like a middle ground category, but let's keep it simple. That's not what we're discussing. So, let's say someone, if you don't do something, someone will lose their eye, lose their arm. That's somewhere in between. But keep it easy. You have life-threatening and not life-threatening. Now, non-life-threatening things are usher to do durabanans for. No, try it again. Is usher to do a doraisa, but is mutter to do a durabanan. So if a person is a chola, they're ill, but they have no sakana. Let's say they have a fever. So a fever is uncomfortable. It is certainly an illness. Your body is fighting a virus or whatever. So there may not be a real danger to one's life. That is to say that if you didn't do anything specifically, your body would fight the fever off and you would live happily ever after. But you want to take medicine to lessen the discomfort or to aid the body in fighting. That depends how that works. So that would be your middle case of chola she'ein bo sakana. So you would not be able to violate a doraisa. You would be able to violate a durabanan. So you could take medicine for that, or you could even, we'll get this later, but you could even ask a non-Jew to do a malacha doraisa for you in that case, right? So that is basically all the Rabbanans are allowed, all the Oraisas are not allowed in that middle category. Then we have the lowest category, which is Mixas Choli. You're uncomfortable. You're not sick. You're certainly, life is not in danger, but you are uncomfortable. This would be a light grade headache, a moderately sore throat, a minor sunburn, a bug bite that is not infected, it's just annoying. These are nuisance type illnesses that are not, you're not sick, but you're moderately uncomfortable. So for these, Chazal said you're not allowed to take medicine. That was the gzeira that if you take medicine, you might make medicine, and making medicines in a deraisa. So Chazal said no medicine for mixas choli. So in the hierarchy, chola sheyesh bo sakana, life-threatening, you can violate even doraisa. Ill but not life-threatening, you can violate derabanan, not doraisa. Discomfort, you can't even violate a derabanan. But what you can do is you can violate a double derabanan. So you could ask a non-Jew to do something to relieve a minor discomfort. Okay, so whereas you could not do something, the non-Jew could, as long as it's only an Isser D'Rabbanan. So Lamashal, if someone has a light sunburn, okay, we're not talking about a heavy sunburn, it's third higher or first higher degrees? How does it work? Okay, let's just pretend first is lower. All right, so let's say a first degree burn is going to be mixas choli. A third degree burn is going to be chola she'ein bo sakana. You're already at risk of infection and the like. And a second degree burn could be either way. It depends exactly what that is. Actually, I mean, in one spot of your body. Okay, so then your middle case would then be a second degree burn. Okay, depending what the burn is, but certainly a light sunburn, one that you get just because you didn't put on enough suntan lotion, whatever, it's terribly uncomfortable, but it's not like your skin is blistering or anything. It's uncomfortable. So that you could not put on a spray that would be made to make it feel better. You could ask a non-Jew, although I don't know if you would have the guts to ask the non-Jew. I guess it depends where the sunburn is. Okay, maybe it's different if it's on your back or your arm, but you ask the non-Jew, can you please spray this on me? That would be mutter, because it's mixus choli, which is asur d'Rabbanan, but it's mutter for a double d'Rabbanan. In contrast, a lotion, which will almost certainly involve an isur d'oraisa of rubbing the lotion in, that you could not ask the non-Jew to do for a minor sunburn. Similarly, if you have a mosquito bite that is annoying you, but it is not infected, it's not dangerous, it's just annoying you. So you can calamine lotion or something like that. If it's a spray, you would not be able to spray that on Shabbos. The non-Jew would be able, you could ask the non-Jew directly to please spray this on my mosquito bite. That's what we would call a shvus to shvus, a double d'Rabbanan, where there is a minor ailment. Now, in any case where there's a bigger ailment, a choles, then you might even be able to ask the non-Jew to do a d'oraisa, but that we'll talk about when we have limitations even in d'oraisa. Right now we're focused on telling a non-Jew to do a d'Rabbanan, so that you're allowed for mixus choli. If you needed eye drops or something, again, not for an infection, but for, let's say, you just eyes were dry or whatever, so that you could not do yourself under many circumstances, you could ask the guy to put those drops in. Now, we always discussed, what if a guy put medicine down your throat? Would that also be a mirror? So that it's hard, because unlike the eye drop where you are totally passive, it's hard to view, especially a tablet, that you're not actively doing something. I mean, you're not totally passive. So I'm not sure if it would help if you have a light headache to have the guy, again, not that, I don't think you'd ask the guy to drop the pill in your mouth, but would that be a violation? So that could be that won't help, because you still are swallowing it. But an eye drop or something, you're totally passive. So you could ask the non-Jew to drop the eye drop in a case where you need it for a annoyance, not something that is a real illness. Not that you couldn't do it for a real illness, you certainly could, but that's just not what you could probably do a d'oraisa also. Here we're talking about a mirror to the guy in a d'Rabbanan, which you couldn't do for a mixus choli, a low-level illness, but the guy could.
So this is medicated eye drops, not like saline drops.
Correct, right. There's some refuah involved, correct, yes. I mean, again, an allergy, a light allergy, whatever the case may be, but the mosquito bite and the sunburn work as good examples. And again, they also have the benefit that you can differentiate between the spray and the cream, which the cream you could not have them do, and the spray you could have them do. Okay, we have one example left where we allow a d'Rabbanan, so we'll save that, and then we'll get into the cases where you could even ask a non-Jew to do a malacha d'oraisa. That would be the next level of exception. So again, after we've gotten what the rules of hinting and benefit are, these now are the exceptions where you could directly ask and directly benefit, essentially cases where this whole prohibition do not apply.